it's about getting out of the way a little bit and seeing things through someone's eyes and through their voice. And yeah, we work with a range of mediums. Obviously, photography has always been our start point, analog photography specifically with disposable cameras, but all of our storytellers write their own stories. We increasingly do a lot in video and film. We've done a lot of exhibitions. We're exploring audio and spoken word and other forms of creative expression. So it really is now, I guess, a multimedia company, but we have that, strong focus on first person.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Drive Phase podcast from Coordinate Sport. This is the show about sports founders, leaders, and experts and the stories behind their business journeys. On today's show, I had a nice chat with Matthew Barrett of GoalClick. He's the founder there, and we discussed his journey from studying history at Oxford and combining his passion for kind of conflict, sport, history, and storytelling to create and launch the platform that is GoalClick. We also discussed the distance travelled since launching GoalClick and one of Matthew's most recent projects with the Qatar 2022 World Cup. A really inspiring conversation showcasing the transformative power of storytelling and just how it can connect people and cultures through the universal language of sport. So enjoy the show.
Okay, I'm really excited today to welcome Matthew Barrett. He is the founder of GoalClick, the global football media and storytelling platform. And he's empowering people all across the world to kind of tell their stories and share their experiences around kind of world-class football events. So yeah, Matthew, great to have you on the show today.
Thank you, and that's a very kind introduction and a very good one.
Okay, so I mean, as we always do on the show, is kind of let our listeners get to know you a little bit better. We're going to talk on everything GoalClick, but just to kind of get to know you a bit better. When we go back and we were having a little preamble beforehand, talking about northeast versus southwest London, etc. But yeah, where did you grow up, and how was your childhood in terms of a sporting background?
For the record, I see no divide between any parts of London, but I was born and raised on the West Essex, East London border, I would say, and grew up in a town called Epping, and then went to school more towards Waltham Forest. And my formative years, particularly from a football perspective, were all across East London, North London and Essex, playing for football teams. I'm a Tottenham fan, which inherited from my father. And yeah, I think sport has always been a big part of my life growing up, from both a playing, following, I guess increasingly academic perspective as I got towards university. So yeah, that's kind of my background.
You mentioned your dad there. Was it kind of a sporty household that you grew up in, and was it kind of competitive from an early age from a sport perspective?
I was thrown into a lot of sport, that's for sure. My mum has little to no interest in sport. My dad did play rugby and football and athletics when he was young and was always in good shape, but I wouldn't say there was any great sporting pedigree in my family. But yeah, I was thrown into football and cricket pretty early on, and those are probably the two sports that I played most when I was growing up.
You mentioned academics there, so I guess as part of our pre-conversations, noticed that you went on to study at high level in terms of university, etc. And your passions early on, obviously sport was there, but history also, and World War II, is that right?
It's a very logical combination. I was a huge history fan from the very start, always loved it as a subject. And yeah, my whole life, and particularly when I got into studying history at university, I was pretty obsessed with Europe in the early 20th century, and particularly the Second World War, still am. But I realised, I was nudged, a tutor of mine, a professor of mine, to explore football and sport in the context of politics and history. And so I ended up writing a thesis on sport in the British Army in the Second World War. I did a lot of studying around sport, and always particularly football, in the context of fascism and communism and democracy. And yeah, it was always, it became a lens through which I looked at the world, and is obviously now the lens I do look at the world. What can sport and football show us about a country, a society, a people, a culture, But yeah, that really grew out of realizing that I could probably get away with studying sport in an academic perspective. So I feel like I was pretty lucky that I found that niche quite early on, and it's led me to where I am today, to be honest. So I do feel quite grateful that sport became something that wasn't just fun, but it was also fun to kind of study, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think it's pretty relevant now as well. We're going to probably talk about that kind of culture at the moment and the debate around sports washing, especially within football, and kind of with your historical knowledge lens on it, you probably see patterns repeating themselves in certain ways. But yeah, we definitely dive into that, especially talking about the World Cup and stuff. I'm curious in terms of going on to study and I guess the sporting environment, studying sport and history together, and I managed to get those two together. But that sporting environment at Oxford, was that for you? How did that feel attending Oxford, and you kind of thrust into, or did you throw yourself into all the kind of unions and sporting perspective, or was it purely kind of heads down and academia at that point?
I have a nasty habit in my life of always becoming the organizer or the captain of everything that I do. So there was a lot of football teams, cricket teams, sports organizations that I found myself part of and invariably in charge of. It's something I'm actually trying to remove from my life as much as possible now. The like desire and the need to organize and be in
Saying yes
charge
to
of
too
things.
much.
Yeah, saying yes to way too much, and I don't have no regrets at all over any of that. It really was the making of me, and I loved every minute. I've always followed the path of doing what I like and what I enjoy, and I think maybe sometimes that isn't the smartest decision in terms of fast track success or remuneration, but I've always followed my heart because I think when I enjoy something, I tend to do it quite well. So my advice usually for people is like follow what feels right rather than trying to plan a narrative or try and get somewhere by feeling like you have to do something. Yeah, I really loved that time in my life. And it's amazing that I do feel I am now basically 15 years later doing an extension of what I was studying, which is really, where geopolitics and history meets sport. So it feels like a real red thread has been going through my life.
And before we kind of dive into everything in terms of the gold clip now in the business, it feels like from just kind of looking and talking to you that you had like a focus on wanting to work in sport or having sport as part of your career, whatever that be, when you were at university. Was that something that you kind of started to develop the thought process around when you were writing the thesis, or was it, did you kind of not stumble into it, or was it just kind of, curious on the pathway into your career starting?
It's a very different world now to what it was 15 years ago. I think now anyone coming out of university, there is so much structure and there's process around getting into the sports industry, and there's graduate positions and there's clear routes in and there's access schemes and there's professionalization of the sports industry that wasn't there 15 years ago. I thought I wanted to work in sport. I thought originally I wanted to work in documentaries and production, but I kind of stumbled across the world of sports marketing. I kind of cringe looking back at like what kind of organizations I was applying to. I was clueless. There was no real support or guidance from university, parents, the industry. And
why did you cringe? Was it they were totally the wrong type of organisation, or was it
totally the wrong type of organisations? Absolutely, probably organisations that weren't even working really in sport. But I didn't really know. But I'll always be very thankful for this. I put in an application for a graduate scheme at a company called Hill and Knowlton Strategies, which is a big PR firm with a good sports team. But I applied generally for it, and then their HR rang me up the next day and said, we've got your application. It starts in 6 months, but would you be interested in coming in to do an internship with a sports team? And I was working a pretty miserable job at the time. And I said, when can I start? And I actually went in the next day and started. So I'll always be very, very grateful that someone in that HR team just like bothered to kind of read the whole of my CV and was like, oh, this person should actually be talking with our sports teams. So it was a bit of a stumble in. The whole industry was not set up in the way it is today. in my opinion.
And I guess when you landed there, well-established firm, etc., what did that look like for someone on an internship and kind of a graduate level? I mean, the account manager type stuff. Were you working alongside client right holders and stuff at that point, or just kind of in the room seeing it all take place and wide-eyed?
I felt like I was given quite a lot of responsibility quite early. Sometimes I think back of the things that we did early on, and I was like, was I really doing that after 6 weeks of working in this industry? So I felt like I got a really amazing crash course, and I felt a lot of trust very early. I mean, I felt like I belonged in that organization very, very quickly. And, still very good friends to this day with a lot of people who I worked with in that company. And yeah, I mean, I think the managing director of that team, a man called Andy Sutherland, I think he created a really amazing environment for people to feel supported and know that even if they screwed up, no one was going to be angry, and that as long as you were trying hard and doing the best you could, there was a lot of opportunity and a lot of trust given. I think that's something that's probably stayed with me a bit, actually, in terms of how I try and run GoalClick. But that was a very formative experience, and very happy days, to be honest. 2 years in the industry, I went out to India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka for the Cricket World Cup on my own, and travelled around 7 different cities running mid-innings kind of promotional activities on the pitch.
Kind of on the pitch, like on the pitch. Yeah, got you.
On the pitch for a sponsor, MoneyGram. And I look back at them like, how on earth was a 23-year-old kind of doing that? But it was quite a crazy time. But I'm very, very proud that I ended up in an organisation like that, which trusted its junior members of staff to kind of go out and do what they thought was the right thing, and probably muck up sometimes, but feel very supported in that.
No, but that's the fast track, I guess, to learning is that experience. Like if you weren't given those opportunities and they kind of held you back a bit, you wouldn't be as confident to take on bigger projects. Was that a bit of a wrench then to leave? Obviously, to move on from there. It seems like great grounding, really great team, supportive management, etc. Was it just an opportunity you couldn't give up when you moved on from there, or how did that transpire?
So I actually moved around a couple of agencies within the same group of WPP. So it almost felt like internal transfers rather than leaving. So I moved on to another agency, ESP, and then another agency, Two Circles, but it was more related opportunities rather than I'm leaving, I'm going somewhere else. But I'd also started GoalClick as a side hustle when I was still at Hill and Knowlton. And then it was kind of growing on the side as I was working for other agencies until I kind of went full-time on GoalClick in 2018. But I'm very grateful for my grounding in agency world because I got to see a lot of how the industry works. I got to have an appreciation for sponsorship, for media relations and PR, for, the deals behind sponsorship and brokering those. I got a really varied insight into how it all fits together. And I always say to people, agency is such a great place to start in your 20s. There's plenty of time to specialize, but seeing as much and doing as much as possible in as quick amount of time, often across different countries and in different disciplines, I think is always a really great way to start. So I'm grateful that I accidentally stumbled into working in sports marketing agencies.
You mentioned that GoalClick initially started as the kind of side hustle, which I'm really curious about in terms of probably firstly just to place it in, I guess, on the timeline. So if we're looking, would this be around 2015 as such? I know you went fully, I guess, all in 2018 time, but when did you initially start and what did that look like in the first instance?
A crazy idea. 2013 was the concept, and 2014 it started. It started with a very simple, basic premise. Can we find people from around the world and get them to tell their own story and show their own football life and community? And to do that, can we give them a disposable analog camera? Very simple, basic premise, but has snowballed into what GoalClick is today. Yeah, it was as simple as sending a camera to Sierre Leone to the National Amputee Football Association in Freetown, to a church minister called Pastor Abraham Bangura, and he was also the coach of the team. He took some incredible photos, which stand the test of time and are still some of the best photos we've ever received back from a GoalClick storyteller. And it just made us realize we were onto something. Myself and my co-founder, Ed Jones, we were working together. And yeah, it just kind of grew very slowly from there. Over the next 2 years, we probably had about 10 people across the world who we sent cameras to, and they took photos and wrote their own stories. And then, yeah, it all kind of started kicking off in 2016 when we did our first exhibition.
How did you go about it, kind of selecting those initial first few partners or storytellers? Was it just, I guess, were they reaching out to you? Was it purely you kind of heard of it, or you were looking for targeting certain areas of the world? What was the premise?
I wish I could tell you there was some grand strategy or master plan behind who we chose initially.
Demographic analysis or something, yeah.
We were naturally drawn towards stories in parts of the world where there were social or geopolitical issues at play, often places with a history of conflict. And given my personal background and interest in the role of sport within conflict, so it's no real surprise that some of the original places that we worked in, I say in, we don't go anywhere. We just kind of work with people who are from those places remotely. But Sierra Leone, Iraq, Liberia, Rwanda, Lebanon, clearly places that we find interesting and unexpected to have football stories coming out of. That was balanced alongside, more expected places like Australia or Mexico. But then, Inca guides in Peru and girls football teams in India, all very, very varied. We wanted to get a real diverse mix from the very outset. We were basically 50-50 gender from the outset, and we really wanted to get a mix of stories. We kind of avoided Europe, and we definitely avoided the UK for quite a while, because we really wanted GoalClick to feel like it was global more than kind of Anglo-centric. I think if you have an organization set up by English people, it can be very easy to just have it taken over by an English-centric gaze. So it was pretty important that we were working with people from all around the world very, very quickly.
And you said, so 2016 was the first exhibition. How was that? I guess was that kind of almost a coming out party, right? You got all the work you did in the last couple of years on show.
It's a really great way of putting it. It really did feel like that. It was one of the best moments of my life, to be honest, to have the exhibition launch and have 100, 150 people in the room, many of whom were friends and collaborators, and to see it all in one place was quite a moment and made us really realize we were on the right track. We actually did that first exhibition in partnership with Adidas and Copper 90, two partners who we still work very closely with today. And that also really cemented what the potential business model might be. So alongside the kind of global work that we were exhibiting, we worked with Adidas to do a London version of the project. And that has kind of been the formula ever since, to find organizations, brands, kind of rights holders, who we can work with and ultimately be commissioned to do more specific focused series. But yeah, that first exhibition during the Euros in London was a real moment for us to say, this is what we do, this is how we're doing it, this is our approach. And also, we can work with massive partners and pull great events together. So it was a real important formative moment for GoalClick, and set us on our way to today.
And I want to definitely circle back on business model and kind of funding profile, partner profile, all those things. But just at this stage, 2016, so you're still in the day job, and you've got to make that decision at some point to kind of step away. How long did that take, or was it kind of was it a natural thing where just GoalClick was taking over all of your spare time plus your work time at some point?
It felt like a real natural progression. It didn't actually feel like a choice in the end. It just felt like an inevitability. I often said that during 2017, it felt like every week I was 2% more sure. And so obviously after 50 weeks, it's about 100%. It really felt like I wanted to do GoalClick full time. It felt like it was the right time from a industry perspective. Just before the Russian World Cup, felt like it was a good moment to do so. Sport becoming entwined with geopolitics ever more. I probably, to be fair, had run out of energy from an agency and industry perspective. It can be an all-encompassing and grueling workload, and I think my tank was running a bit empty. And yeah, it just all felt like it was the natural thing to do, rather than like one day going, oh, I need to I need to stop this and do something else. It was like, this is my destiny. And again, I often advise people that, you know, to an extent, developing that side hustle like is very smart, because it means that you're not putting all your eggs in one basket that hasn't been tested. You know, I felt pretty confident, even though it was going to take a lot of work. And the first year of Gold Click, you know, I had to make a lot of life decisions that were very different from what I was doing previously in terms of salary and where I was living and how I was living. The fact that I knew that there was a model and knew that it was something that could work gave me a lot of confidence that I wasn't just like making a rash kind of crazy decision. I always think that testing an idea before you make that big leap, if you can, is a smart thing to do, because, you know, also everyone's got to eat. And if you rush out of something too fast and into something new, you know, it comes with a lot of problems. And, you know, we've never had any investment. I don't necessarily come from a place where there's, you know, lots of benefactors. So I felt that it had to be something that had real potential and was a bit tested before I made that leap.
And I guess there's always I might be naive on this one, but it feels like it's like a natural kind of project-based business model. If you know what I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but you work with a partner on a project, you work with another one. So is it kind of always you have to look at, like, where's the next one coming from? Or you might be running multiple projects, I'm sure, but it's not kind of, I guess you've got to get over that to scale up the business and also to be comfortable that you're sustainable. I think.
Absolutely right. You've hit the nail on the head. It's working with multiple partners at the same time, but most of those partnerships last between 3 and 12 months. And so, yeah, it's about always looking ahead to where the next project, the next commission will be. About 40% of our work is with partners. The rest is, well, I should say about 40% is with commercial partners. The rest is either with pro bono partners or just original stories that we want to do, wherever they may be in the world. So yeah, but obviously those projects, which last for the amount of time they last for, underpin all the other work that we do. I should probably say what Gold Click is.
I was just about to go in and say. My question was: it feels like a production company, right? But you class yourself as more of a platform, a storytelling platform. Have I got that right? Or and probably a good time, like you said, to give us a full rundown of kind of the offer, I suppose, and how things go.
All this is the same. What is Gold Click? What are we talking about here? So I would say we are a hybrid between production, platform, and network. We don't sit easily into any one of those, but we are absolutely part of all three. What Gold Click has now become, obviously, you've heard a bit of the origin story, but now we would describe ourselves as a global storytelling organization that finds people from all around the world and gets them to tell their own stories about their football lives and communities from a first-person perspective. The crucial underpinning of Gold Click is that everything is through a first-person perspective, giving the power, control, the freedom to the people themselves, whether they be elite players in the women's game or football fans or amateur players or refugees or people in conflict zones. It's about getting out of the way a little bit and seeing things through someone's eyes and through their voice. And yeah, we work with a range of mediums. Obviously, photography has always been our start point. analog photography specifically with disposable cameras, but all of our storytellers write their own stories. We increasingly do a lot in video and film. We've done a lot of exhibitions. We're exploring audio and spoken word and other forms of creative expression. So it really is now, I guess, a multimedia company, but we have that strong focus on first person. The other thing to say is that obviously our network is very strong, having had 9 years of building up around the world, and alongside the kind of original content series that we create and that we publish, we also, I guess, now cast. So we'll find people to be part of projects. Sometimes we might not even do the content. We might just be literally finding people in certain places around the world. That's definitely been the last 18 months where we've done more of that kind of work. But mostly we kind of find the people and we do the kind of content production and publication as well on our channels. But it's predominantly for the partner channels that we work with from a paid project perspective.
So just on that network perspective, the example of this is my curiosity. So I could be, let's say I'm shooting a movie, I don't know, remake of what's the name of that film? Is it Great Escape? Not The Great Escape. The old school one.
Escape to Victory.
So I'm doing a football movie. Escape to Victory, there we go, yeah. I'm doing a remake of Escape to Victory, but I need some cast members. Yeah. I'd be able to come to you to say, look, we want to tell the backstory of X player, and you'd be able to, through your network, say we can kind of help with that and help source some of the talent or some of the authentic cast members.
That's definitely a brief that we haven't received yet, but we'd love to try our hand at it. I think it's
anyone out there who's looking to make that movie.
I think it's more that a lot of organizations want to find like real human stories and real people who are not necessarily professional content creators, but they have great stories. And we will often be asked, please, can you find 8 Liverpool fans from Vietnam, South Africa, Australia, and places of your choosing. Or we did a project with 90 Min where they wanted us to find one super fan from each of the 32 nations playing at the World Cup. And so, yeah, we will go away and find the right stories, the right people for the right projects. It's a very natural extension of what we do anyway. Like we are always every day talking with people around the world in football communities, from Namibia to Peru to Palestine to South Korea, even North Korea. And it's a very natural extension of what we do, which is find great people and guide them through telling their own story.
Yeah, and I'm sure you probably have the list of all the stories and things you'd like to do and haven't got around to do them, or all the projects that aren't quite right yet. So yeah, I'm kind of curious on some of the challenges you've had. I know you mentioned the disposable cameras, etc. Have you ever had a moment where I guess the footage of the cameras didn't make it back to get developed and stuff, and you lost a story in transit or anything like that? Any nightmare stories? I'm sure there's a few.
I could speak about disposable cameras and post offices for days. How long do you have? To cycle back 1 second, Antarctica is the one place in the world where we have not yet told a story that I really want us to tell a story. So if anyone can ever find us some kind of football-related story in Antarctica, please do get in touch. In terms of challenges, I mean, the great disposable camera shortage of 2021 and 2022 has definitely been a challenge because there was like a year where it was very, very hard to get hold of those cameras. Chinese supply chains, general supply chains, just really, really hard. The cameras are often made out of recycled plastic, and yeah, a whole post-COVID backlog was not great. Post services around the world are always trying to challenge us. So we try to obviously send things slowly and, in a green way. Sometimes we have to use courier services, but we try not to. And then I guess the big challenge, to be honest, James, is human beings. human beings are both the best thing about GoldClick and the worst thing about GoldClick, because they bring so much reality and so much authenticity and power to their stories, and unlocking those stories is like pretty incredible. And you can see through something that isn't real pretty quickly. So human beings make GoldClick what it is, but also human beings will always find every single new possible way to not complete the task. We are very patient, and we pride ourselves on being really great guides and really caring about the people that we work with. We want to make sure that they are comfortable every step of the way. We want to make sure that the end product is absolutely what they want to say and what they want to show. But it does come with challenges of people dropping out or going missing or missing deadlines, which sometimes is not their fault at all. But yeah, it's a very human first organization, which is both our greatest strength and also potentially our greatest weakness. But over the years, we've become quite good at working with human beings, reliable or unreliable.
I'm just thinking now, I'm assuming, or maybe not, but you definitely take the credit for having that foresight in terms of now looking at the world of content and like the thirst for content constantly, and especially first person storytelling, right? You must have like a huge demand for what you're doing, and being able to scale up to meet that demand. Or how do you think about that in terms of keeping it authentic and keeping it with the kind of the feel of the disposable cameras versus, I'm sure you could kind of scale up really quickly, so right, everyone just get a TikTok account and broadcast your story straight into that. How do you kind of go, like, balance those two?
It's a really good set of questions. I'll try and answer try and answer all of them in one go.
Yeah, sorry, I loaded that one up a little bit, so I've broken that down.
All good, all good. So the demand is strong, particularly coming out of COVID. I think our method of remote production and meaningful content and meaningful stories is quite a great combination right now. So yes, we have seen in the last 18 months a huge surge of interest in GoldClick and the way in which we tell stories. And it's only, hopefully, going to get more this way. We are not analog zealots. We always start with analog, but we also now operate, particularly from a video perspective, in digital, if that term just sums up everything in the world. But yeah, ultimately, we are getting people to use their phones as well to capture their worlds from a film perspective. Ultimately, it's about mixed media. We love the combination of analog and sometimes digital photography, written words, video on a phone. That raw feeling and that mixed feeling can be very, very powerful. So a lot of our projects now integrate video, written word, and photography pretty seamlessly together. We did a really great project middle of last year with EE around their Hope United campaign tackling misogyny in grassroots football, and that was equal parts video, written word, and photography. And we've done a lot of work in Qatar ahead of the World Cup, which also covered off all of those elements. So yeah, I guess the thing we try and stay true to is that first person nature. It actually doesn't even really matter about the format. It doesn't even really matter about the sport. We've started to move into other sports away from football.
That was going to be one of my questions,
particularly with there you go. With Rugby League World Cup was our first foray into another sport. I think we try and get people away from thinking about photography or football, or it's about first-person storytelling. And then our muse is football, and our method is through lots of different ways of doing it. But ultimately, it's kind of giving people that platform, which is something that isn't done so much because it's harder and it takes more time and it takes more trust, and it's easier just to insert a film crew or kind of control the narrative. But actually, if you do take the time to give up control a bit, I think the results are pretty stunning.
Sure, and it feels like you probably get more not the best word, more of an intimate, obviously definitely authentic, but you're getting closer to the subject or closer to their story than, like you said, if you've got a cameraman and a sound guy and everything else around them, probably not going to open up as much.
Totally. There's definitely some famous examples where I think that's been very true. I think our work with the US women's national team ahead of the World Cup in 2019, we worked with some of their players, Kelly O'Hara and Sam Lewis, and the photos that came back of the squad in a pre-tournament training camp, and particularly a famous photo of Rose Lavelle and Alex Morgan in an ice bath. They just couldn't have been taken by anyone apart from a teammate. They're so intimate, they're so raw, they're so natural, they're so unguarded. They might not even have been able to be taken by anything but a disposable camera, to be honest. So we often find that a lot of the stories that come back could only be done by someone who is from that community and who has the trust of those around them. You know, our work in refugee and asylum seeker communities with the UNHCR, it's a really difficult group to access and to gain trust of, because refugees and asylum seekers are not treated very well by the world, mostly. And so coming and saying, you're in control, we want you to tell your story, not only gives people confidence and sense of worth, it actually creates better stories. So that's why we will always stick to that way of working.
I mean, my limited knowledge from the outside looking, it's definitely that I'm assuming they wouldn't feel as though they're being. There's probably an element where they could feel as though they're being used. You know what I mean? If you've got like, oh, we want to come and get a picture, and we'll be in control of the production, and we want to get this shot, we'll get that shot, and they could feel or could look like that they're being used for someone else's agenda, basically, rather than be able to tell their story, which is why I think definitely. So you're on the right line. It feels like it resonate. I'm really curious in terms of like your long-term vision. So do you have outside, obviously, the stories are going to grow in scale and looking at different sports, always looking at the best way to tell a story or find a great story. But do you have another kind of a long-term vision? Is it that you want to have a gold clip museum, traveling exhibition, events? Like, is there something that you really want to kind of get on the also you're on Netflix style streaming platform, whatever it be? What's your kind of long-term view? Was it all about the work?
Never even considered a gold clip museum before. So thanks for putting that into my mind. Do you know what? It might not be the most visionary answer right now because I could make up loads of like lofty goals. We still feel like we're at the start of our journey, or at least the start of the middle of our journey. You know, coming out of COVID, the last 18 months to 2 years has been incredible in terms of growth. We're now a core team of 9, which is brilliant. And I didn't necessarily expect us to ever get to here. You know, that 9 is a mixture of full-time, half-time and part-time. So we have a real strong structure and a real strong ethos now that I actually just want to get really right and do just great work in the next few years. I want us also to move into other sports. So we started with rugby league and there will be more coming over the next couple of years. You know, we're at the start of our journey around like documentary film and video, and you know, we want to keep doing it really well. And yes, I would love to do more like long form documentary film in the end, but you know, I think we have to like build really strong foundations for that first. Audio is definitely the next frontier, as is kind of spoken word storytelling events. They're kind of 2 elements that we're really looking at this year and how we can do good work in those areas. But really, the next 3 years, the pivot is to North America, well, North and Central America, with the next World Cup in the US, Canada, and Mexico, and the growth of the sport over there and the money that's coming into the sport from that region. Obviously, we were quite focused around the Middle East for obvious reasons over the last couple of years. But yeah, that's a bit of a strategic pivot, I guess, to that part of the world. And yeah, I just want to keep working with great organizations and have us make big impact because, you know, we don't just want to tell a story and move on. we always try and keep working with the storytellers and the organizations that we partner with. So yeah, just continuing to make a big impact and really becoming best in class at what we already are trying to do, I think is the vision for the next kind of 3 years or so. Beyond that, honestly, I've never tried to look that far ahead, James. It's always for me been about, well, in many parts of my life, I'm trying to stop kind of creating this long-term narrative, and actually just kind of be more open to what comes along. And I know we're on the right track. And I think if we just keep doing what we're doing, keep working with great partners, keep telling great stories and finding great people, we'll end up where we need to be.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to ask about kind of the long form when you mentioned documentary making before, all the kind of embedded and the reality behind the scenes, sports, all or nothings and those type of things, the kind of the drive to survive. And all. I'm sure there'll be opportunities for you there. Your people knocking on the door for at some point for you to kind of come in and help them produce or work on a project. I know, just skipping, I guess switching gears a little bit away from the organisation, more for yourself. But I know you mentioned a couple of times about maybe it felt like maybe that you're thinking about balance more. You know, like turning things down, not saying yes to so much and things like that. Do you have any things that you kind of outside, in addition to that, kind of habits or just approaches to life and work that you kind of put in place to keep you in top form, to keep you sane? Do you know what I mean? What's the things that you kind of make sure you always focus on?
Yeah, you've detected I'm definitely a bit of a crossroads in life. I'm not a crossroads, but I'm entering a different phase of my life. Like the last 18 months has been a real focus on goal click, probably at the expense of most other things. There's been a lot of traveling, kind of personal and professional kind of mixed together. It's sometimes very hard to know where my personal and my professional stop. It just doesn't really exist, that separation in my mind, in a good way. But there are dark sides to that as well. I think the things that keep me sane, I'm definitely more of an audio learner and an audio enjoyer. Don't know if that's even a word. I listen to a lot of podcasts, both to kind of relax, but also to learn. So that's kind of my main form of kind of knowledge and relaxation. I need to do better at kind of little and often from a looking after the body perspective. I think that sometimes I might have been guilty of just focusing way too much on goal click, as was the case. But I'm definitely interested now in like making sure there's balance. We have a team now. I can stop being a bottleneck. I can stop feeling as though the burden is always on me. I will still work really, really hard. That's part of my DNA. But I think distributing work more evenly amongst the team is something that I really aspire to. And that will open up space for lots of other things in my world, I think. In terms of habits, I guess what I would say is that I think the habit I have is to be hopefully a very nice person. And I say that in the sense that I try and always reply quickly. I try and always be communicative. And I love meeting new people. I love hearing their stories, and I love kind of being curious about the world and people in it. And I think sometimes that can almost be all consuming. But when it's at the right level, I think it leads to all the success that Goal Click has had. Being someone that is always keen to talk to people and also help people without expectation. And I think something that I've started doing just naturally is making lots of introductions for people and not necessarily expecting anything to come back. I think it's a really healthy habit to get into. And I try, every meeting I have, I always try and either make sure that I have one on-bound connection and that I give one on-bound connection. Another little thing that people laugh at is whenever you're in an event or a conference, always, as you're leaving, speak to the last person that you see. Because the amount of good things that have come into my life through speaking to the last person is unbelievable. And it's always a fun way of being like, I'm just leaving, but I always like try and say hello to the last person I see on my way out of somewhere. So, hi, I'm Matt, who are you? 1 minute. has led to partnerships, it's led to employees, it's led to amazing collaborations. So that's a little fun top tip that I always try and tell people, and people sometimes laugh at me, but there you go.
No, that's a great takeaway. It's probably self-fulfilling prophecy now. So every time, because you're going into it, such good energy, thinking this is going to be something awesome. That connection every time now you're leaving, it's definitely.
Oh, a really good point you say about good energy. I think good energy attracts good energy, and if you go in to something realizing that everyone's in the same position, like especially if you're like an event, like they're just other human beings. Like no one's really knows what they're doing or got it all worked out. They're all probably just as, fearful as you are. Like they're just like, I think I just view a lot of other people as like either scared humans or humans who are just doing the best that they can. And that just like, it makes me realize that extending the hand is often a massive relief to the other person. And so I think sometimes the dark side of that is that I'm not very deferential to people who are in so-called authority, and maybe that's something that one day won't be a good thing. But to be honest, I think it just makes me realize that everyone is basically equal and no one's better than anyone else. And I think that comes through in what GoalClick does, because we treat everyone very equally, whether you are an elite footballer or someone who's experienced real, a really bad existence. That's a bit generalist there, but has come through really tough times or has faced really big challenges. We're all trying to do the best we can. We all have opportunities and we all have barriers in our way. I think that's how I try to approach life, and that often helps move things forward and helps me take advantage of things by realizing that we're all supposed to be where we are.
Loads of great insights there, passing on to our listeners, and I think that the audio one as well. I'm an audio guy as well. It's like that debate whether if you listen to a book, did you actually read it or not? That's the one I'll say yes. So I do a lot of audio books. It's got to be difficult for you, just when you touched on something there around meeting so many people and hearing their stories. For you, do you find that difficult, being the type of guy you are, to not be thinking about a new film, like a film every time you speak to them? Because everyone's got a story, right? Everyone's got something that you could make a film of, right? So if you meet so many people, that must be a challenge to know which ones to pursue and which ones not to, or just have your head full of ideas and stuff.
It's a really good question. And the other side of that is that I do often worry that I'm becoming slightly desensitized to stories and suffering. We work so much in communities that have been through, a lot of tough experiences, that I do worry sometimes I am becoming a little bit immune and yet desensitized. And also, it is a very valid worry that I start seeing people as stories rather than people. I don't think I'm there, but undoubtedly, we're in the business of finding good stories and finding good people. What I would say is that I think the way in which we work and the effort and the time that we put into people and the friendships we kind of foster with the people we work with means that we're always on the right side of that. We're not in and out, thank you, goodbye, see you later. We really do invest a lot of time in people and we care about them. And so I think it's a combination of recognizing they have a great story, but also recognizing they're a great person. So yeah, it's very good things to be mindful of. But I think we strike the right balance in the end.
Sure, and just last question from me, man. When you think back to yourself when you start out your career, if you could go back and give yourself a bit of advice starting out, just travel back in time, do that one piece of advice, what would you tell your younger self before you maybe left university or started your first job?
I think there is a very pernicious and often damaging impression given by people in authority and power, and often founders, that they knew exactly what to do, they're geniuses, they had it all worked out, they were special, they had the qualifications needed to do something. I think that is a very convenient myth, we are all on a journey of development, of growth, of learning. We all have massive weaknesses. We should all be wanting to learn the whole time. And fearing that you can't do something because you don't have the right qualifications, or you're not experienced enough, or you're, worried about, not being seen as valid, is natural, but it also shouldn't hold you back. Don't wait until you have everything perfectly worked out to start something. So many people, I think, just don't start, because they don't have the full plan worked out. GoClick didn't have everything worked out when it started. We just sent a disposable camera to Sierre Leone, and we've created a very successful organization out of that. I didn't have it all worked out. I didn't have any qualifications necessarily, in this particular field. I don't have an MBA. I don't know anything really about business. I don't know anything about IP law or accountancy. It just, that wasn't a reason not to start. And I think that we don't have time to go into my feelings around imposter syndrome, but you can imagine that I'm not a fan of it as a term. I'm a fan of it as like a reality of what it encapsulates, but not of it as a term. And yeah, I think the other thing I'd say is just start with 5 minutes, because that's all we did. We started with 5 minutes, and then the next week we did 10 minutes. And then the next week we did 10 minutes a day. And from there, great things can happen. So yeah, that's a bit of a odyssey of what
I
myself
love that. And that's the thing.
as a younger person.
With people, just it is just that thing. It's obviously Nate got it right, just do it kind of thing. But if you looked at everything, for yourself, if you looked at everything that you need to learn and do and cover off for GoClick now for it to be successful, you probably wouldn't have sent that first camera right now. That's too much of a challenge. So yeah, once you're on that
absolutely
way,
not. The other two very small bits of advice, which I always pass on, and I don't know how relevant they'll be for people because it's often directed to people maybe slightly younger in their careers, is that, whenever you're switching a position or job, don't think about that position or job, think about where it leads you next. Because I think sometimes you might take a position that feels great and maybe has, good salary and feels like the best decision, but it can box you in. I think always being aware of the next +1 job is very important. And then the other thing, particularly for younger people, is honestly in your 20s, do as much as you can in as many different places with as many different disciplines as possible. Honestly, when I look at CVs or when I look at people and I see someone who, like me, stayed in the same place for ages, I'm kind of well, what were you worried about? Obviously, this is all said with the realization that it's not often that easy to get roles and jobs, and we can't all have the the fortune of coasting into a role really easily. But I think I guess it's more, don't be scared to try some new things, because in your 30s it won't be as easy. In your 20s it will be easier. Still not easy, but easier.
I love that, Matthew. So, just want to say thanks so much for being so transparent with us. And what we will do as well is make sure that we link as much of obviously all of your channels and content into the show notes, so that people can go and consume that and absorb the stories and look out for the next project. I'm sure you've got something big and exciting coming along. But yeah, thanks so much for your time.
Yeah. My absolute pleasure. Thank you very much. And yeah, it's going to be a big year with Women's World Cup and various other things on the horizon. And yeah, would love it if people went and checked out GoClick on social, on our website. And if anyone wants to collaborate, if anyone has any great story ideas, we're always open to hearing from people. So thank you very much, James, for the great questions. And yeah, speak soon.